I I am really glad to be here, and I'm really glad that you're all interested in hearing a perspective from the family's point of view. Um, Shannon and I are both what you call NAMI mommies. So we have both have children with mental health diagnosis, fairly serious mental health diagnosis. Shannon, as she mentioned, her daughter was diagnosed with bipolar, and I have a son who has schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type. So we have sort of a program set up for you. I'm going to go through it really quickly because you are the experts and we are the people with lived experience. But we were asked to come to you with insights into mental health treatment barriers for people with psychosis, early onset psychosis, or we're kind of going at it from any type of serious mental illness perspective. So Um, I'm going to go through quickly. Getting a diagnosis, that's the first step, which is very difficult, particularly if your child is under 18, because I feel that probably most medical health professionals don't want to give a young person a serious medical diagnosis, so they don't in the beginning. And so, as a parent, I'm not begging for a diagnosis. We're just sort of lost and don't know what's going on. Then the diagnosis changes over time. And I think a lot of times we get anxiety or depression for the early diagnosis. And that's what, okay, we just need to get our child to a therapist and put them on some anti-anxiety medication, which can actually be very bad for the kids who are showing the prodromal phase of psychosis or schizophrenia. Lack of knowledge about mental illness, that's on us. We don't know anything. So we're at home thinking we don't know what's going on. We have no clue. Typically, um, you know, our child is acting strangely, but is it strange? We don't know because we have one child or two child or three children. We don't see 50 children and are not able to compare our child's behavior to other children's behavior. Um, so the prodromal phase of schizophrenia is often mistaken for being a difficult teen. That's just what we hear. And our friends tell us that, and sometimes the doctors tell us that too, because they don't know for sure either. Um, and then also we hear that, there's a lot of different illnesses that can cause psychotic behavior, psychosis. And of course, as a parent, you're hoping it's anything but schizophrenia because nobody wants that diagnosis. The next thing that we don't know about, and hopefully you guys know about, but I think it's sort of a new concept, is anosognosia with mental illness. And that is, which I'm hoping you all know, but it is the inability to recognize or acknowledge one's own illness or disability, even when there's clear evidence of the disability. And we can call it lack of insight, but I think what it used to be mostly referred to was denial from the patient. And I like to think of um, my own thoughts as denial because I didn't want my son to have anything so serious and awful. But his perspective obviously is not denial, it's anosognosia. There's unreasonable expectations of persons with mental illness. We think we're going to put them on medication and they're going to get better, but that's obviously not the way it works. Um, we can't reason with them to take their medication due to all these other things, due to anosognosia, because they're not sick. Why are they going to take it? We have to learn as a family that you can't reason with a person with delusions or hallucinations. You can't, we can look and see that's not happening, but you can't tell them that. But it takes time for the family to learn that. Um, Also, recovery is long, so which you probably already know too, is the average time to be in a recovery state is 10 years. That's a very long time. And if you tell someone their 18-year-old child is going to be off the rocker for the next 10 years, it's pretty hard to accept that. Um, and then also we have to learn what recovery means because we don't, as a family, we don't understand that. We think recovery means they're going to get better. And it just means that they they're going to get better, but they're not going to be well. And we have to learn that. Availability of services, the 24-hour hold and release is way too short for anyone to know what this person's going through. I'm trying to keep this short, and I know I'm already going a little longer than I want to, but um, you know, they hold them for 24 hours and then they write a prescription and send them home and expect them to take that medication. And that's not going to happen. Just not. And then especially if this person doesn't have the good support of their family, is really not going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen to that person? And a lot of these kids don't have the support of their family because we don't know what's going on. We haven't figured it out yet. There's a lack of beds, as you all know. There's a long wait time in the ER, which is miserable and torturous for everybody. Um, I believe the age of medical consent in New Mexico is 16. Is that correct? Some places it's 14, but that's way too young for a kid to be able to decide whether they need help or not. HIPAA is is a nightmare because well, first of all, the parents don't get it, but if you are a parent, just imagine your child is in a car accident and they're admitted to the hospital and you call the hospital and they say, we can't deny or we cannot admit nor deny whether your son is here. Or they won't even say your son. They won't say their name. They won't say whether they're there. Even if you know they're there, because I've done that. I've said, I know they're there. I just saw the police, took them into the hospital. We can't talk to you. And I think one of the things that NAMI really pushes is teaching parents that we are allowed to talk to you. We are allowed to, and you are allowed to listen to us. And I think, maybe 10 years ago, a lot of the medical professionals didn't know that because they didn't even want to listen to what we had to say. And so the HIPAA rules, they're so difficult, but the truth is you can listen to us. And in a parent's perspective, it's really, really important to listen to us because when you're talking to my son who is in psychosis, he's not going to tell you reality. Yeah, he's going to tell you mom's crazy. He's going to tell you they tried to kill me. You might be able to tell he's in psychosis if it's really bad, but they're also really good at telling you what you want to hear. They are going to tell you, I'm fine. No, I'm not going to hurt myself. No, I'm not going to hurt my parents. And I am fine. I'm not hearing anything. I'm fine. And they're going to walk out the door and be right in the terrible situation that they were in. Um, so as long as we all start to understand HIPAA, I think it's going to be okay. But it just has taken a long time. We talk to parents all the time who have no idea they're allowed to write a letter or send an email or call the office or send a report. They don't know that. And my final little category is stigma, which is horrible. And you probably know all this too. There's a lot of shame in having a mental health diagnosis. A lot of the people believe it's their own fault. They've done something bad. They are bad. Um, they're crazy or psycho, or, every movie you see portrays people with schizophrenia as a horrible psycho monster. And this is what our kids have watched growing up, of course, or what they see now online. And this is the words that they use for bad people. Um, Shame, disappointment, they're living a life where their friends and their family members and their siblings are all finishing college and getting married and having kids and having careers, and they are not. So there's a lot of resentment, I think, and sadness and shame. And also, isolation is a huge problem because they don't really tend to have a lot of friends. They don't have relationships. They're lucky if they have a relationship with their family. And so they are very isolated. And this is even, this is my son, and he has a place to live and he has food, and he's okay, but he's alone. And so just it's pretty tough, it's a pretty tough life for somebody. Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna turn it over to Shannon. She's gonna share a little bit just about her personal story.
Thank you, Jane. I could follow what Jane said and just stick in what happened to us. But where it started is that my beautiful, gifted little girl, when she was 12, her behavior just kind of started changing. And I had two boys. Here's my girl. She's at that age, she's at puberty, things are happening. This is normal. People are telling me, oh, yeah, that's normal. Girls aren't easier. But there were rages. She said she hated us. This is the little girl who loved us so much. Um, she started self-harming, those scratches on her arms. I wrote off to, the bad influence of other kids at middle school. She had suicidal ideation, and she started not going to school. And this wasn't like she was skipping school. She just physically could not get herself together or out of the car to go to school. We live in far northern Rio Rancho, and at the time she was going to school in Albuquerque. And I remember one day in particular when she was off the rails. We were on Paseo. For what it's worth, it was before they did the construction. And instead of dropping her off at school, I ended up in a Circle K parking lot, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what was happening. The worst case scenarios, does she have a mental illness? Because no one I knew anybody, had anybody in their family. This was really rare. Oh my God, what are we going to do? I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know, do I take her to the urgent care? What do I do? Brought her back home. What do I do? We did find a therapist who was not the right therapist. And I think my expectations were really high because here's a therapist. She's going to fix my kid. And then we're going to go back. I'm going to go back to having this beautiful, quiet, gifted, go to school, straight A daughter. But not so much. Found another therapist. At this point, we got really, really lucky because this therapist was not the right one either. However, she recognized the signs and suggested that our daughter take dialectical behavior therapy, which was great, except that made me think we had the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. My daughter's now around age 14, and yeah, no, I got my hand slapped for saying that. Why would I think that that was her diagnosis? But she did go through the dialectical behavior therapy. And after that, we got another therapist who told me that borderline personality disorder wasn't real. And I wouldn't want my daughter to have that because it was really, really awful. So, wasn't real, but let's not have that because it's bad. It was all very confusing. And I just felt like we were going up against a wall at every turn. But we kept her in therapy. She got through school. We did it an unconventional way, which was online in 2018. She graduated. How weird is that your kid would go to school online? But it worked for us, and it turned out it worked for some other people too, as a couple years, shoot forward a couple years. Once she turned 18, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Right after she graduated high school and turned 18, she took a handful of antipsychotics. I called, they came, took her in an ambulance to a hospital which now has behavioral health, but did not at the time because of my work with NAMI. I knew that it did not. Um, they let her talk to a doctor on the screen, and then they sent her to uh, Albuquerque, which was, I thought, thank God they're going to hospitalize her. They did not. They, because she was over 18, co-ed, co-ed ward, and the doctor himself came down and said, we can't have her up there. She's not safe. She's young and pretty. What do we do? What do we do with that? You know? So I'm not going to go on and on. I will say that at one point, when my daughter was in an appointment, I opened a magazine and it talked about NAMI, and I moved on that one, and that was in 2016. My people are NAMI people. I have other friends, but the people that I've met at support groups, teaching classes, taking classes, whatever, they get it. And guess what I found out? I am not the only one who has a person in my life who has mental illness. It's very, very common, but people don't talk about it. And if I could go back to that morning in the Circle K parking lot, it would be that. So that's why what we do at NAMI is so important. What you all do is so important. And I'm just going to let it go at one last thing. My daughter is doing well at the moment, and I'm knocking on wood because I know, like Jane said, she is not cured. She's well medicated, and she has gone through, different therapies, and she's stabilized herself. But I know that the other shoe could drop. So thank you. And I'm sorry, Jane, I probably went over my 5 minutes that I promised
No,
I wouldn't.
I think one story is good. I'm not going to tell my story. I think if anybody has any questions they want to ask us, now is a good time.
What questions do people have?
How long did it take to find some partnership with your physicians and your therapist?
I'm going to jump in on that. The only thing I can say is we jumped from one to the next. And there was one doctor, she was under 18. And my daughter, when we left, I would go in with her. It was a psychiatrist. And my daughter said to me, why does she look at you when she's talking to me and look at me when she's talking to you, sort of thing? But she has had the same psychiatrist, or I should say psych meds doctor. I don't think they're a full psychiatrist, but for probably the last 3 years, and she's 25, and I haven't been involved in this at all, but it's worked. It's been a good thing for her, and he keeps her meds very, he listens, like if she has a problem in between appointments. We did have to, for quite some time, pay out of pocket.
Yeah, I'm going to say with Stephen, my son was diagnosed at 18, but he was definitely sick longer than that. Um, but he was hospitalized between 18 and 22 at least 10 times. And after that, they finally he's in New York State, and they put him on an AOT. And then he was not hospitalized for several years, but they took him off the AOT because he did so well. And then he started to stop taking his meds and all that, and then was hospitalized a couple more times. I think within the last 2 years. He's now 29, but he went 22 to 26, I think, without being hospitalized because of that AOT, and finally getting a treatment program. He has a caseworker and a psychiatrist and a therapist, and he just really, and a doctor, and he goes in for his shots. That's the only thing I think that has saved his life, really. And so he's back on AOT again now, thank God. And he's doing pretty well.
Jane, can you say what an AOT is? Not everybody's familiar
Oh,
with
yeah, that's an assisted outpatient treatment, which is a court-ordered treatment. So they have to either be involved in the court system, or he was never, thank goodness, involved in arrested or involved in the court system, but because of so many hospitalizations and the inability to really keep himself safe without direction and guidance, that's how he got put on.
what
And
other questions?
all of this AOT, was it here in New Mexico, or it was
So
started in
they
New
have
York?
this was all in New York, but they do have AOT in New
They do?
Mexico.
Yeah.
Just started. So as I understand it, because I've only been in New Mexico 6 years and my son has not been here. So everything I've experienced is Virginia and New York. But I guess they had it before and then they lost their funding, but it's back. So
I just got out
hopefully,
of a phone call with them.
yeah,
Just 1 hour ago, we had a conversation with them, the people that are running that program.
yeah, I'm
So
really excited.
it's only Bernalillo County, though.
I know, unfortunately.
Yeah,
It's a good start.
it's a
Yeah.
good start.
I was going to mention too that NAMI is all over the state. It's all over the country. NAMI has over 600 affiliates across the country. But in New Mexico alone, we have Albuquerque affiliate, Santa Fe affiliate, San Juan County, and Southern New Mexico. So the thing that helped me was when finally Stephen, we had him hospitalized, not, it wasn't, he didn't want to. So that was a really bad situation where I had to go in and basically I had to testify that he needed to be hospitalized in front of him and a doctor and a nurse and his attorney, his appointed attorney. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible experience, and I wish I never had to do that. And it really drove a wedge between myself and my son and the family and my son. Anyway, that at that time is when someone gave me a NAMI card. And until I had that, I mean, just what Shannon said, NAMI is really a lifesaver for the families, hopefully for our loved ones too. And we have a whole group of people who participate in NAMI on the peer side who really, it has helped them. But not everyone, like Shannon's daughter has been a little active in NAMI. My son has never participated. I wish he would, but I mean, it helps all the way around.
Yeah, I see in the chat, Mary, you have a question. Do you want to ask a question? The question is it a treatment guardian?
The AOT, it's not. Treatment guardian is different.
And Catherine, I think you waved your hand. Do you have a question?
First of all, I just wanted to thank you and the National NAMI from a clinical standpoint as well as a parental standpoint and being a parent of adults with psychosis. You folks, the National Hub really allowed me to have a sense of center, which is extremely important. There's a piece in the cultural um, um, zone of discussion that I'd like to at least just bring up. Being part of a Cuban family, the firstborn male is not to be anything but perfect,
Mhm.
right? And so there's an enormous amount of barriers culturally. And so, and of course, being the ever-present advocating mom, I was also seen as the devil in the family because here's this white woman telling us our beautiful Cuban grandson is not well. So it was really tough. And I was just curious about in NAMI, are there any people, departments, programs that may do a little bit more outreach to Hispanic and Latino communities?
Actually, yes, we're really, NAMI National has a lot of programs like that. And so each affiliate, we take on what we can. But we are literally right now expanding our programs. First of all, we're doing a new FaithNet program, which is reaching out to all the different faiths because we get all the time requests from the churches, like who are in contact with people who are in psychosis all the time, and they are in crisis and they don't know how to deal with it. But also, Compartiendo Esperanza, we're trying to reach out to the Hispanic community. We are trying to reach out to the Native American community because it's the same stigma with the Native Americans, Hispanics, African American families have a lot of stigma. And so we really are trying to bring in all the different communities and start new support groups. And we're also reaching out to veterans right now specifically.
And when we do our programs, family to family specifically comes to mind. we do touch on the cultural differences, whether it be religion or identity, um,
Yeah.
where you're from. So we touch on it, we're aware of it, and would love to see some more focused groups.
Thank you.
I see there's a lot of NAMI um, resources, way to contact NAMI in the chat. So you might want to take a look at that. What other questions do people have? I have a question, and especially Jane, because I saw in your bio that you do the sharing your story with law enforcement.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the barriers that maybe parents have had with law enforcement and like what needs to be communicated?
So a lot of parents are afraid to call the police because they're afraid their loved one will get shot. And that used to happen a lot, and it still happens sometimes now. And I would just say right away that my husband just retired after 35 years in law enforcement. So I am pro law enforcement. Um, but the fact that they're being trained now with the crisis intervention, and in New Mexico, we're really lucky because they all get 40 hours of crisis intervention training. And then we have specific officers who have, just it's in their heart to do more training, and those are our crisis intervention teams. So it's just a matter of them understanding a lot of things that we had to learn how to understand. Don't yell at a person who is hearing voices because that's just going to make everything worse. And I look at it in the perspective of law enforcement officers, particularly young officers come in and they're inexperienced and it's scary. Guess what? Being a cop is really scary. And then if a person's acting off and they maybe have a weapon or something, I really can understand how things go bad. So if they go in understanding that this person isn't thinking on the same plane as us, they're seeing things you're not seeing, they're hearing things you're not seeing, and they're probably pretty negative things. If they're in this crisis, they're probably hearing voices telling them they're in danger or they're stupid or they should do something bad. So stay calm. Um, that's the biggest barrier, though, I think, because we still have parents who have had bad experiences and don't want to call 911 or 988 even, because they're just going to send the cops and they're going to come in their uniforms. If you can approach without a uniform, much better than approaching with a uniform. But what else? One time, my son, when early on, he thought that we had stolen all of his things and that we had put him in the hospital to be poisoned. And so he wanted his things. So he was calling the cops and he wanted his stuff. And so we went to meet him in front of a friend's house to give him back a carload of things. And the police came and they were not helpful. They were just they told us to put his stuff on the sidewalk in front of his friend's house and leave. Like he had no vehicle. So that was not a good experience with law enforcement. They need to know, first of all, the parents are in crisis too. The person is in crisis, but so are the parents, and they're maybe not, we're on the verge of losing it just as much almost as our loved one. And so a little empathy at the moment for everyone involved is very, very helpful. But they're pretty good. I think when we go into our talks, they're really receptive to hearing this and being better at what they're doing, I feel. Shannon, have you had?
I've been fortunate enough not to have interaction myself, but I think Jane and I have probably taught the family to family class 14 times, and quite often at a question period, people ask about that, or people can't believe that another parent has called the police on their own child. Oh, I could never do that. You know, they'll get killed. And so it is really important what Jane and her panel do with sharing your story with law enforcement. I think is just vital to opening up, and we are getting that training again. Um, it's a start, but I've just heard other people's stories, and with the ugly stories or the scary stories, most of what I've heard has been positive. The negatives I've heard is that the police didn't do anything. Sometimes their hands are tied and they can't. We
Well,
teach,
thank you.
we talk to people though about how to give information, just like giving information to doctors. When the police are called, when you make that initial contact with the 911 operator, tell them what's going on. Be completely upfront with them. And then the best advice I ever had came from a parent who had to call quite often for one of the adults in the house to go out into the street and meet the officer so they could, see a face. Catherine, you have a question.
I, I, my experience with the police and our interactions were mostly in Texas. We were lucky that all the officers had a device on them where we could enter the information to include symptomology, speech patterns, things like that. So when we moved here, we were really disappointed to see that the police officers, well, when I went up to one in a restaurant, I said, "Can I enter some information about my kids who live with mental health challenges into your handheld device?" He looked at me like a deer in headlights and says, "What handheld device?" So I know these things exist. I wonder if NAMI has any power in trying to get that technology to our law enforcement here in New Mexico, because it was literally life-saving in Texas. One of my adult kids had a habit of suicide by cop challenges, but the police officers knew that they needed to look and see, okay, is this person, if they can get any ID at all, they could bring up one of my kids, profile, go, oh, okay, this is how we talk to this person. And it literally saved the life of at least one of my clients as well as one of my kids. So I would just, I know there's only so much you can do, but but the squeaky wheel, as they say. So yeah,
I think definitely. So NAMI New Mexico is the state organization, and they are the ones who can do all sorts of good stuff with the state. So I would say find out what the device is and contact NAMI New Mexico. And anybody's welcome to contact me, and I'll put my email in the chat. But maybe, I mean, find out what that is. I will say that you can register somehow. Now, I haven't done it here, but I've heard some of my people, thank you, Shannon. I've heard some of my people talking about registering their loved one with the police. So you can call the department and tell them about your loved one so that it is in the registry. But yeah, a little handheld device would be pretty handy.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you, Shannon and Jane. This presentation has been fantastic, and I love all the resources. I hope that, I know now I'm gonna take some time to go through the NAMI website and see what resources are available. And I know you said there's virtual groups that people can attend if they don't live in the Albuquerque area. And so I think though right now we'll stop the recording.